we like being an 11 personnel team. There's a place for 10 personnel, but tight ends that are versatile, that can do different things like we've had in the past. One played right here in Dallas, Blake Jarwin. Those guys give us a lot of flexibility, and that's what we're looking for in that position.
Now that you've gotten to know the new staff maybe a little bit more, just kind of what stood out about that group?
Well, first off, I didn't know anybody on defense until they showed up. And spring ball for me was an introduction to them as a coach because I didn't have any history with any of them. Offensively, obviously Coach Meacham and I go back. I've got a little bit of history with the line guys because they played for me. But overall, they're very aggressive. They're very knowledgeable. They understand their systems. They seem to do a good job of communicating and coaching. A lot of times, coaches don't do a good job of coaching. You know, they can talk a lot and show a lot and demonstrate, but they don't actually get information to the player. I think these guys are good coaches, and I like where we're at. We'll see. We got a lot of work in August, a lot of uncertainty, not from a talent standpoint, but really knowing what everybody brings to the table, particularly the 35 guys that we've never seen practice. So that's a first for us. So that's an exciting part for me. And the coaches seem to be in really good position to take advantage of that, but they'll have their work cut out for them in August.
The two O-line guys, could you tell while they were players that, hey, this guy might make a good coach someday? Could you tell that while they're playing?
I say two. Grant Garner's with us also three. All three of those guys were kind of self-made, under-recruited guys that came in and worked their way up to playing at a very high level. Most coaches that do the best job of coaching, in my opinion, are guys that worked their way up from the bottom and had to find a way to fight and survive, and all three of those guys did that.
Are you talking about the differences in this staff? Is that the aggressiveness? Does that kind of bleed over into recruiting, you think, as well?
Well, this group is very aggressive in recruiting. Several guys that we have on our staff have spent time in the southeast part of the country, which is a different style of recruiting. And having them here has benefited us. It's benefited me, watching and listening to ideas. They've been in staff rooms that had a very aggressive, relentless style of recruiting based on the environments and the geographical location they were at. And they've done a good job. There's several players that didn't have us even in their top five, and we found our way in. And that's just them going in and digging in and working at it and getting them on our campus. And in most cases, if we get them on our campus, we have a pretty good chance to get them.
You mentioned your vacation coming up. Are you even going to be able to enjoy it, or are you going to be thinking about the fact that you have 35 guys that you haven't seen practice before?
Well, I'll enjoy it because, as I said earlier, one thing that I've done is learn to control what I can control. Those guys I can't control right now. I don't have any idea what's going to happen with those guys. Their coaches have to have them trained. That's what I told them before we broke out a few weeks ago. So I'll be able to relax and enjoy myself. But you know, there's a large percentage of the guys that could be playing in the first game that we don't know who that is. Good news is I think we've got a bunch of guys that can make plays. We'll see if we can get them coached up.
With the 35 guys and the uncertainty just general about the two deep at this time of year, how does that change your day-to-day when y'all start fall camp?
Not really as day-to-day as much as maybe the way we practice. So we have to put them in more of a game situation to see what we can get out of them earlier than what we would in a traditional year. When I would go away on vacation, I had a pretty good idea who's going to play quarterback, pretty good idea who the two deep is, where our issues are, where they're not. Now you don't really know as much. I do think that there are some positives in that the players understand it's in a competitive world now. So money's involved, players are getting paid, players that produce and get results in whatever it is that we're looking for are going to get paid more next year. So there's a competitive nature that's there that's maybe not has been there as much in the past, because money motivates people, and that's in place at this time.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about now with the amount of hours you can practice in a week compared to 20 years ago when maybe you could have them on the field more and maybe even kind of look at them a little bit more deeper?
So we're restricted when school starts. There's some restrictions in place preseason, not really as much of a factor. I think a bigger factor is with roster limitations and total number of players, you'll be reduced for total number of reps you can get in practices. So if you were going to get 350 reps in a practice with 140 players, you can't get 350 reps in a practice with 110 players, in my opinion. That'll be as different as the rest of it.
How soon do you have to be down to 105? Do you even know?
First game. That's one of the things I know.
First game or first day?
First game.
First game.
Coach Trace Trolko, Sons of UCF. I cover Scott Frost. What's one piece of advice you would give Coach Frost coming back from the Big 12?
Shoot, I don't know. Scott's done very well. The last time he was at that place, they won about 15 games. That may be an exaggeration.
Not
13,
much.
14. They had a good year. Scott could probably handle that himself. I listened to him, visited with him a little bit in Orlando. One thing he did do is, when we were in Orlando at the meetings, you know, when you have those functions and business meetings, you know, they have like big desserts all over the place. And there was this huge cookie, like this big and like that thick, and had all the kind of frosting on it. And I know I do this. You see people like when they just like take part of it because they're like, I'm not going to eat all this. And he just took part of it and he ate it. Then he took the other part and he ate it. And by the time the meeting was over, he ate the whole cookie. So after that, I said, Scott, you know, you might as well just commit early and take the whole cookie and eat the whole thing. I said, you did what everybody else does. You're still young enough you can do it. That'd be the only advice I have for him.
Alex Grinch is his defensive coordinator.
Mhm.
Was at Oklahoma. Any memories of having faced Oklahoma and DC?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we went against him for a number of years, yeah. And then, of course, he went out to SC for a while. But guys understands football, is a good coach, been around a long time. I haven't watched him as close lately. Obviously, he's been out west. But we have a lot of familiarity with his style.
Mike, this
Coach
might
Gundy,
be a
can you talk about the, obviously you've been coaching for 21 seasons, but can you talk about the similarities between you guys and Texas Tech and how you feel about the Texas Tech rivalry?
We have a good rivalry with Tech. There's a lot of similarities with schools in this conference, right? So Tech and Oklahoma State are a lot alike. Kansas State and Oklahoma State are a lot alike. And really in the big picture, you know, you take the private school aspect out of it. You know, your Baylor, your TCU, Kansas, a lot of similarities, Iowa State. That's the one cool thing about this league. But Oklahoma State and Tech have very similar fan bases in the fact that they're very rowdy on game day and they're very loud.
Mike, this might be an apples to oranges comparison, but 2 years ago, before the 23 season, we're here at Big 12 Media Day. You guys had really struggled the year before to run the ball. And I said, how do you fix that? And you said, we gotta rep it. We gotta practice it a bunch. You went out and had that great running the ball season in 23. Coming out of last year, and maybe the comparison is different because you do have such the player turnover. But are there things about last year, fundamentally, that you guys struggled at, that you feel like there's a fix, that tackling wasn't great late in the year, something like that you feel like has got to improve and you're committed to this is how we fix it?
When I looked at last year, as I said earlier, there are a few things that factored in a big way. One is our inability to run the ball. And in my opinion, we weren't a very effective passing team, and so that took away from our ability to run. Once that happened, teams started seeing on video where our deficiencies were. They knew how to attack us. Snowball got going downhill, and we couldn't get out of the way. Defensively, when I looked at it, as I said earlier, we went to the majority of a 4 down. I didn't feel like our personnel was set up for 3 down. And I asked Brian to get in a system that he wasn't as familiar with. And that wasn't all Brian's fault. That's my fault, that part. And we couldn't adjust as well as we needed to during the season in certain games. And that was because of some of the unfamiliarity with the system. So those 2 things you can fix. One way is the head coach not asking a coordinator to do something that maybe he's not capable of. And the other is for us to stay healthy and be sound, throwing the ball down the field, which allows for rushing football.
Can you, I mean, different quarterbacks bring different passing abilities. Can you be effective throwing the ball even if you don't have, I mean, you talk to maybe you're not able to get that pocket pass as much at Oklahoma State. Can you still be effective if you don't maybe have that Mason Rudolph or, I mean, whoever you want to say, sort of that more traditional pocket pass?
I'm not sure that in college football, if you have a team that is somewhat equal to the other teams in the country, what I mean by that is if you're a school that's investing a lot of money in players and you have a better roster than the other team, you can do whatever you want, okay? But if you're a team that is in that top 10 to top 40-ish, I'm not sure you can just sit in the pocket and throw the ball anymore. Because I think college defensive linemen are so much better than they ever have been. They're almost like playing in the NFL. Like, you can't, it's hard to sit in the pocket in the NFL and just throw the ball. It's difficult because you can't block those guys. Even with good offensive linemen, they can't block those guys. I think that's the same way in college now, in my opinion. So I'm hoping that we and those typical teams will have the ability to throw the ball without being pure pocket passing teams. And I just think you're going to give up 6 or 7 sacks a game, which means your percentages of winning drop below 20%.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the quarterbacks you added, Mason and Banks Bowen, just the youngsters, how important was that for depth in the room, and also just the perspective of a father-son with Clinton Banks?
Yeah, so we picked up quarterbacks that are young, that we can train. I mean, the system, college football now with the portal, is not set up for the most part, in our opinion, to bring in 2 somewhat experienced quarterbacks, because then someone's going to turn around and leave a semester. So you play the percentages, right? You bring in young quarterbacks, try to get them in the system and develop them. And then with Banks, it's a unique situation. I went through it with Gunner to be a coach of your son that's on the staff. Time that I had with Gunner is treasured forever. I'll never get those days back. It was awesome, but it can be difficult. He'll be in those meetings when Coach Meacham and them are critiquing him. So coaches have to learn to be in uncomfortable situations, because most of the people, not most, half the people don't agree with what we do and half do. Same thing with a dad of a player that's on your team.
You've talked about culture through the years. How do you go about building that when you don't have as many returning coaches or players?
We don't have that answer yet. What we have done is put things in place to help, because we have so many new players, as we know. Again, 35 of them just showed up in June, so they've been here for 40 days. So you spend time with them, you bring them to dinners and have them sit at different seats. I suggest to them that every day each player introduces himself to another player that he doesn't know who he is, not by face, but by actually knowing who he is. and spend 30 seconds in telling him about you, and then you ask him about him for 30 seconds. Then at least you have some sort of a tie to that person. If you can do that over a 6-month period, a 2-month period, you knock out 60 people. So then you can start to get to know your team a little better. Those are things that we've worked on, but it's different. The culture that we've had at Oklahoma State prior to the portal has always taken place, particularly over the winter months, January through July. And you had 20 incoming players, so it was really easy to acclimate those 20. And 18 of those 20 never played in the first year anyway. So it was easy to bring them in and get to know them, in comparison to now where you have probably 80% of your roster or your starters are going to be guys that weren't on your team last year.
Does it help a little bit going from 4 quarterbacks trying to decide down to 2 to really kind of make that decision? Does that make that decision any easier?
From a rep standpoint, it does. From a security standpoint, it doesn't. And it's not just Oklahoma State, right? Everybody in the country is dealing with this, where you hope to have 2 guys that you feel like that can function well enough for you to win a game, and then you've got young guys you're bringing along. I don't know if there's anybody in the country that has 3 quarterbacks that they could throw out there and feel comfortable. So it's just a part of the future. It's the one area that concerns me. I think anybody in the country could be within a couple of injuries away of a tough year if it's at that position.
With Zane and Haas, how would you sort of describe maybe how they approach the position stylistically? Like, are there differences that you see the way that
both of them can throw it. They're both accurate. They're both mobile. They're tough. They're grinders. They have a lot of similarities.
Any differences?
Here's the bad news. I haven't seen any one of them play a game yet. I've seen Haas practice, and I've seen Zane practice with pretty much on the scout team. That's all I know. So the first game, I'll find out a lot more about him, just like you will.
Quarterback leadership used to be such a big thing. It was like they had to play well, but they also had to be leaders. With the way that rosters have changed, is that still the case? You still need your quarterback?
I think that the quarterbacks will have to acquire leadership, and they'll have to get the team to migrate and follow them.
Have you?
More challenging for a guy that might be just showing up, but I think it can happen. We've seen it. I've seen portal quarterbacks across the country show up, and to me, they look like leaders from the outside.
The way you answered Tyler's question there, sound like maybe you're kind of expecting to play both of them in the first game?
We very well could. I think it would be unfair to say one or the other right now. Just have to wait and see. Somebody's going to have to take the job, or we have to play both.
Coach, can you talk about your recruiting approach in the state of Texas and greater East Texas, and what your mentality is going into getting players to Oklahoma State in that area?
Well, your East Texas Metroplex area, even somewhat really Central Texas, outside the Fort Worth area is really is included in-state for us. It always has been. We've when our rosters were 135 players, 75 or 80 of them from the state of Texas. There's a lot of population here. There's a lot of money that's put into high school football in the state of Texas and the coaches, and so you get a product that's pretty far along from the state. And we rely on being in-state. Oklahoma's population's 4.1 million. On most years, there'll be 3 or 4 players traditionally that Oklahoma has offered, and there'll be 6 or 7 that Oklahoma State has offered. And those numbers will be reduced considerably compared to the state of Texas. So it's a simple business process, right? If you're selling vacuum cleaners for a living, you got to go somewhere where you can sell a bunch of vacuum cleaners. And the numbers down here in Texas have provided us a great opportunity to recruit a lot of players.
With the Zane and Haas, I don't think either one of them has thrown a pass in a game. Is that something that? Can you
I think Haas has.
Can you think of? at the
Did
time?
he not attempt a forward pass? He didn't even pitch an option backwards.
Might have had an option.
That's not a pass.
It's a backwards pass. I knew he played in games, but I guess I didn't pay that close attention, so that makes me feel better. Neither one of them have attempted a forward pass in a college football game.
Is that something, I mean, you kind of just mentioned it, but like, have you had that in your time where none of the quarterbacks you're considering have actually
I
thrown?
don't think ever that we've had not anybody on the roster ever attempt a forward pass in a game. I'm glad you brought that up. On my vacation.
In 15, you
I
used
might be at happy hour longer now. Yeah, go ahead.
in 15 you used Mason and JW. Is there a world where it looks somewhat similar, or would you rather have one guy be the guy?
I think everybody would rather have one guy, right? And it's easier for that player to develop the leadership skills and the things we talked about. But we can't make that happen. That has to happen itself. So I'll give you an example. Like, what if we try to make that happen with a certain person and it's wrong? That's, to me, worse than not knowing. You're better off not knowing and let them figure it out versus trying to make this happen and then it could be the wrong way. Because what happens is you lose credibility with the team. You lose credibility with the team, and in my opinion, you got issues.
How much rosters change from fall to spring, spring to fall, that kind of thing? How has that changed the timeline with which you scout opponents?
In which we scout who?
Your opponents.
Opponents? That's a good question. So for us, like the first couple games of the year, those coaching staffs and rosters have kind of stayed intact. So we can do that. Once you get beyond that, you can always look into league play if coordinators haven't changed, and you can do some summer work. But you still have to study in season. Once you get past game 2, in most cases you have enough video to watch from the current year to where you can tie a system in with the talent they particularly have that year.
Mike, when we think about summer ball, we think of 7-on-7, skill players getting better. How do the offensive lines get better during those months? And just your expectations of what those kids have done the last 2 or 3 months.
So now we have OTAs, for lack of a better term, more practices really. They just don't have pads on. So they've trained over a 4-week period, more so than they have in the past. It's going to change more, in my opinion, as we move forward next year. I think you'll see the ability for schools to have a certain number of practices, 20-ish, from the end of the season all the way up till July 1. Pads or no pads, you can do them however you want. And that could adjust what you're talking about some in the future, because I think that'll be the next step for college football.
How big was this summer for a new defensive or new offensive line? You're trying to get guys installed. How big was that to get them better and get more prepared for the fall?
I mean, it is, but like part of that 35 are 2 or 3 offensive linemen that have a chance to play in the first game, and they weren't even here. So they need to train themselves in this month of July. So our coaches have given them what they want them to do, 4 days a week. And they have to take it upon themselves to do it. Because by rule, we can't coach them in July.
You had this opportunity for a reset. Other than looking for just the best coaches you could find or best players, was there a quality or two that you were looking for in all of these people that you were bringing into the program this year?
So, because of the way college football is going, my job has changed considerably the last 3 years. One, my hours and days have increased, and my X's and O's time has decreased. So what I look for is a head coach on offense and a head coach on defense, and ask them to do that because I can't be there. Not that I can factor in, but I don't have time to be as involved. that was important, and that took maturity. So we weren't in a position to bring a young guy in at that position based on what I was looking for right away. And then we're still looking for players that fit into our culture, that we think will be successful in our geographical environment, in the system that we've set for 20 years. Now they need to be good enough, hopefully, and we've evaluated them properly, but they still need to fit in our culture or they'll be disrupted with the flow.
Coach, I know there are a lot of uncertainties, this year with all the roster turnover, but is there something that you've seen so far that gives you confidence this group can bounce back this year?
Well, I'm confident that we're fine. I just don't know when it's going to show up. I don't have any doubt about the coaches that are here now, and I don't have any doubt about the talent level we have. When I use the term uncertainty, it only means that I don't know when it's going to happen because I've never been in this situation before. So I'm hoping by the middle of August, our coaches will say, okay, this is who we are. This is our identity on offense. This is who we are on defense. Now let's find a way to get ready to play in the first game. Because whether you like it or not, once you get into the season, it's over. We get 2 practices a week, and they're not very long, and they're getting ready for the next opponent.
How important will that UT Martin game be, considering what you have in week 2 going to Oregon?
Well, unfortunately, the UT Martin game, we're going to find a lot about our team. You are too. I'm going to get to know as much as you do. And then hopefully we're in a position that we're feel comfortable with how things went, and we can build on it and then get ready for the next game.
Non-Saturday games early. Is that still why you like having some non-Saturday non-conference?
It gives us a chance to prepare and then have an extra day and a half to, go play a team that's going to be in the top 5 in the country. So we need that extra day and a half.
And I think one of the things you had said in the past was it kind of keeps you from having the conference mandate that you have. That's played out pretty well, right?
Yeah, it has. You can either take it upon yourself to do it, or you can have it done to you. And so we've tried to get out in front of some of that.
It feels weird asking this because Ollie just left, but is this one of the deeper running back rooms that you think you've had? It feels like there's 5 guys in there that could play.
Our running back room is a lot like this conference. We could have 5 guys that could go out there and rush the ball for 100 yards. Now, I don't know if that'll happen based on we might have the luxury of fresh guys being in there, but we've got a pretty deep room at that position.
Challenging is Kenyatta's job. You talk about how important it is becoming, but how challenging is that job because of the changing nature of it?
Yeah, so you have Rob Glass is the stability of the program, right? So you want him there more than anybody, including me. And then you have the scouting department with what Todd Bradford does. So that's in its sectional separate identity over here. And then you have what Kenyatta does, which is extremely different. And he's in the process right now of training Ryan Simmons. Okay, so we hired Ryan Simmons to be his assistant. He's been with us a month. Kenyatta's the only person that knows what he does. Nobody else knows what he does. Nobody else has experience in the NFL with contracts, NFL Players Association. Nobody has the experience with agents, the communication. He is an integral part of this moving forward. Like if he was to say, okay, I'm quitting unless you all quadruple my salary, they would have to quadruple his salary because nobody else can do what he does. So, it's like in the workforce, somebody should have told all of us, you make yourself irreplaceable and so productive that your boss says, I can't lose that person. That's where he's at. Kenyatta has an advantage because he's a great communicator. Like, everybody likes Kenyatta, and he can talk dollar figures with 19-year-old kids. Think about that. Okay? If you have children that are that age yet, to talk hundreds of thousands of dollars and maybe millions of dollars with a 20-year-old and try to make sense of it, extremely difficult. He can do that. And he has unbelievable relationships with agents and representatives, and they trust him. When they trust him, they'll communicate with him. And he has information. Information is powerful. So what he does is extremely important. And I would highly recommend that Oklahoma State never loses him.
What's sort of the order of, does it start with Todd identifying a guy, then it gets passed to the coaches, and then it goes to Kenyatta? Is there like a system that you guys have, or is it a little different based on the player?
So our scouting department watches everybody. They've watched all the 26s. They've watched the majority of the 27s. And then they break down those numbers and they'll pass it on to their position coach, because they all have their position coach. And then that position coach is responsible for evaluating those players, because I'm holding them accountable for coaching those guys on Saturday. They need to be the ones that brought him in. So I don't want the discussion going on, well, I didn't want that guy. So ultimately, our scouting department puts them in a position to manage their time better. And then they need to decide who they want. And then they have to finish it. They got to go get it. And that's the challenge, right? So what's different now is, wouldn't you think in the latter part of November there'll be schools that are desperate that will go make big runs for good players and offer them a lot of money? So that's going to be the challenge moving forward. So hopefully the coaches and the scouting department has a relationship with those young men that they can hold when somebody comes in and gives them a 25% raise before they've ever stepped on campus. That's going to be the challenge moving forward. That's my guess. I don't know. It hadn't happened. I'm just looking in the future.